Welcome to the Doctor's Life Podcast with Diane Ansari Wynn, MD. Dr. Diane is a coach for doctors. With her 15 years of experience as an anesthesiologist and certification as a physician development coach, Dr. Diane coaches doctors on how to live a rich life of purpose, fulfillment, freedom, and happiness both at work and at home. In this podcast, Dr. Diane brings together doctors and researchers that are experts in health, wellness, stress, and burnout, as well as doctors that have been successful in clinical practice, academics, non-clinical careers, and business to share their expertise and life experience so that you can live your own life purpose, fulfillment, freedom, and happiness. To get free access to a PDF and video of easy and proven strategies that melt stress away and keep it away, simply register at www.dianeansari-win.com. That's www.dianeansari-winn.com. Now here is your host, Dr. Diane Ansari Wynn.
Hi, it's Dr. Diane here, and I have a quick request before we jump into the show. If you like this podcast, it would mean so much if you took just a moment to hop over to iTunes, write a review, and rate the show. That is how other people will find the show and get the same great value from it that I hope that you're getting. It just takes a few moments to click a star rating and write a quick note. Now, on to the show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Doctor's Life podcast. Today we are discussing the experience of faculty of color in academic medicine. And we're with Dr. Sylk Sotto today. She's an assistant professor and serves as the Vice Chair of Faculty Affairs and Diversity in the Department of Medicine at Indiana University. Her scholarship and research centers on inequity and equity in higher education and academic medicine. In addition, Dr. Sotto's interests include faculty affairs and professional development, equity, inclusion and diversity, STEM and medical education, and leadership and administration. She also brings years of experience in higher education, finance and administration, research administration, compliance, and ethics. Dr. Sotto holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Colorado State University, a master's in business administration, a master's in healthcare leadership with a concentration in health policy, law, and ethics, and a doctorate in higher education from the University of Denver. Welcome, Dr. Sotto. Thank you so much. It's going to be an awesome discussion. Being a woman of color that basically grew up in medicine, this is going to be an awesome discussion. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to just chat with you about these experiences. Yeah.
We always start off with your story and how you got into what you do. It's always so inspiring and interesting to hear. How did you get to where you are now, what you're doing now?
I came from Puerto Rico. I'm Puerto Rican, and I came to college in Colorado. And I can't say that my undergraduate experience was one of the best in the books. I do love Colorado State University for anybody that is listening to this podcast from there. It's great. Yeah. Great education, great friends. It's where I met my spouse and all the good things that Fort Collins has to offer. But I definitely did not feel supported as a Latino student in chemistry. Now, this was probably very early on when student affairs wasn't as developed as it is today, where more support is provided to underrepresented students. But, at that time, I was one of the few females in my chemistry program. And in addition to that, I didn't meet any other minority, to be honest, in the program as well. So, the challenges that come with that. I graduate, and as I was pondering, should I go to med school or do a PhD in basic science? And it was clear that none of that was going to happen at that moment. So I decided to go into biotech and worked for a little bit as a chemist there and realized that the science and the business side doesn't always communicate. And that's when I decided to get this MBA. So we moved to Denver to pursue the MBA, and that was when my first job in academic medicine started. So I was working as a researcher in the Division of Pulmonary Sciences and Critical Care at University of Colorado Health Sciences Center while I was pursuing my MBA in the evenings, and continued to do that kind of research in addition to doing a little bit of oncology research. That was a great experience. Of course, during the undergraduate experience, I didn't have any faculty of color in the STEM program. And then when I went into the Health Sciences Center, I only really saw a few faculty physician scientists that were color. And of course, that I was very curious about that and why that is. Later on, I realized that if I had that role model or some people that I could look up to and say they did it, I could do it too. That would have been probably a different career path or something that would have taken a lot less time to get to than where I am today. After that, I continued this research administration and compliance and ethics path. Went to work for University of Denver as their research compliance officer, manager. And then again, the opportunity came up to come back to academic medicine. And I said, yes, of course. Academic medicine has always felt like my home, not only because it provides all the excitement of the science, the education, the research. It is exciting. It's an exciting environment for me. And said, yep, I will go back. And went back to what is now as University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus in my role within the Department of Medicine, and came back to the division that I loved, which was the Pulmonary Sciences and Critical Care. But again, being faced with the same type of curiosity, if you will, the number of underrepresented faculty, not only in the division, but in the department and the school, are very dismal. And we're talking about medical students and how we support them in their experiences. When we're talking about underrepresented faculty, how do we support them not only in creating a good environment for them to thrive, but also in their promotion and tenure and faculty development. And that's when I decided to go back to school for a doctorate in higher education. So I decided to focus on faculty development and professional development, and wrote my dissertation on the socialization, mentoring, faculty and professional development of Black and Latino faculty in academic medicine. There was an opportunity to come to Indiana University as vice chair of the Department of Medicine, and I definitely took full advantage of that opportunity. And we moved to Indiana University about 2.5 years ago. So I gave you a 20-year span right there. I'm sure I skipped a few degrees in between, but that's pretty much the path that led to Indiana.
Right. I think the thing that's notable for everybody is that we come to where we are and through different routes, and the experiences that you have had in your education as you have pursued your education have definitely informed and shaped and helped you develop your passion around the work that you're doing right now. What do you think is the current environment then in academic medicine from your standpoint? You're the only vice chair that I've met in the medicine department that is of color. Do you see many? And you can talk about the general experience, and then you can share as much as or little as you like about your own experiences as well.
Sure. I have to say that at the beginning, I didn't necessarily know, at the beginning of the doctorate program, and it's in EDD, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to focus on. I just knew that it had to do with underrepresentation in medicine. That part I knew. But I have to give props to the program in the sense that I hadn't, in all those years, over 15 years by the time I got to the doctorate program, I hadn't had time to reflect on my own path on my own identity. And the program did provide an opportunity for me to look into my own experiences as a minority, as a Puerto Rican woman in science and medicine. I have to say that because that program provided a foundation. The foundation is in inclusive excellence, and it provided me with a community of other graduate students, experienced professionals as well, that definitely provided the support that I needed to be more confident in what I wanted to look at. So the experiences, when I first started looking at the literature, for example, of the experiences of underrepresented faculty in medicine, I can't say that it stands out as an asset-based kind of experience. A lot of what we see in the literature is underrepresentation that points to feelings of isolation, feelings of lack of mentors, experiences of racism, lack of leadership opportunities, a lot of other negative experiences that definitely do not endorse a culture of promotion and tenure. We do know now that about 6% or hovers between 6 and 7% of the faculty in academic medicine are Black. Let's identify as Black and Latino.
Okay.
And then, out of those, if you look at the AAMC data, you see that over 65% or close to 70% is really concentrated at that assistant professor, instructor, or other, so at lower ranks as opposed to associate and professor levels. And that's big. It has a lot to say about the type of environment that perhaps has clear barriers to, staying. And a lot of the academic medical centers are really what we say in higher ed as predominantly white institutions, right?
Right. So the question that I was wondering about is, of those statistics, as you said, 6 to 7%, and then the vast majority, at least 2/3, are in
those lower ranks.
We would say like developing rank positions. I was wondering, does that break it out into medical schools or academic institutions that are predominantly white or based in
historically Black medical institutions? And that, I don't know that I can make a clear statement because I don't know that AAMC may have the data. I don't know that I have seen it published. Definitely a good question.
Speaking to those feelings of isolation.
Yes.
And that is definitely an experience of pretty much not just faculty, because I'm not faculty, but being a physician or meeting people in academics. We're just so happy to see each other.
We're very happy to see each other.
We've been there for a long time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, that's, and I have to say that some of these trends, again, the leadership participation, the hostility, the unwelcoming environment, isolation, and all those items are also seen in the underrepresented faculty in higher ed in general, right?
Yeah.
That's not necessarily just limited to academic medicine, but in some other aspects, obviously the experiences are different in an academic medicine center because they're not just experience these things from students and colleagues, right? Especially when you're talking about physicians, you're also talking about patients. You're also talking about the health system. You're talking about every single group they come in interaction with, trainees, interprofessional teams.
It's the nurses, it's the tech.
Yes.
It's the lab staff, everybody. You can get.
It's everybody. So it gets, in my mind, a little bit more complex because of those interactions. Or more interesting to me.
Right. Well, being a researcher, it is more interesting because the more that you dig and the more that we know, then the better, right? So if it's not unearthed and we don't know, how are we going to make any difference? That's actually a question that I have is that, and I want to commend you for the work that you're doing, because what I see sometimes is that as a minority faculty or myself as a minority physician, and you are, oftentimes not in the majority, or definitely in the minority, or like you're saying, one of those 5 or 6 in the room, or like in my practice, for the longest, I was the only Black woman. Matter of fact, for almost the whole 15 years that I was in practice, I was the only Black woman in our practice of about 30 physicians. Mm-hmm. And so there's the conflict, whether or not we bring these things to the fore and then learn about them and deal with them, or try to assimilate and kind of get by, right? Looking at it from the academic perspective. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think that the key word that you just said in that comment is this assimilation. So I have to say one thing. I don't like to talk about the deficit, of from a deficit lens, again, in pointing out all these negative experiences that underrepresented faculty have. But it's important to also highlight the asset that they're bringing to institutions, right? We know that underrepresented physicians are incredibly interested in serving underserved and underinsured, populations of this country, that a lot of academic medical centers' missions are clearly stated as addressing healthcare disparities in this country. We know that underrepresented faculty is definitely important in connecting with students of color, mentoring students of color. They also bring to the forefront a lot of interests that are dedicated, a lot of issues that are centered around these underserved populations. So there's great value that they bring to the academic center, for sure, and to the research mission and to the healthcare mission. But this assimilation has been also written in the literature. Again, being underrepresented and working in academic medical centers where the majority is a white majority presents issues around assimilation. I think one study, and I apologize because I can't really think right away of which individual did the study, but talks about underrepresented faculty presenting themselves within white exterior characteristics, communicating in a way that is accepted by the majority, arranging your hair, making sure your hair is one that is accepted, by the majority. So there's definitely this assimilation that happens, and I do believe that people are starting to fight back a little bit more. For example, myself, I used to wear, my hair straight most of the time, especially if I was going to big meetings with the big people at the institution. Mm-hmm. And I never realized that until one of my daughters, I have 3 daughters, that are Afro-Latinas, pointed out that why I was doing that to my curls. And that was eye-opening. So again, even myself, in knowing the research, knowing these things, I was even, practicing that. Now I don't even bother to straighten my hair. Yeah. With the curls you get, it's what you get to see. So these are concepts that might not be incredibly obvious to people, but are part of this assimilation. Also, in terms of language, I presented a paper based on the research that I had done, specific to Latino faculty and accents. Yes. So what that definitely showed, and I, at the same time, I believe this is not limited to Latino faculty, just individuals having an accent in general, that they're deemed as less credible, less prepared in many instances. So the study particularly covered Latino faculty because those were the faculty that I talked to that were more open about their experiences when it came to accents and attacks on their credibility and credentials. For example, I had a participant that spoke about his student evaluation and saying that if he excellent teaching evaluations. However, one of the comments from the students was, if he lost his accent, he would be excellent. So this is not just, exactly, this is not just one random, event.
I would think it's interesting to point out too, as you were saying, that the faculty have those experiences not only like from their colleagues or from their leaders, but this is a student.
This is a student
commenting on faculty. There is a hierarchy in medicine. And for all of you who are listening, most of you are doctors, so I know that you understand this, but for those of you who aren't, to have a student criticize you solely upon your presentation, the way you present to me is frankly, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. It's like having a student comment, like you said, on your hair or your dress, or as opposed to the quality, the content of your work.
Yeah, which had been already evaluated at the highest levels. Again, we see in this aspect where there are institutions that have accent modification programs, which is something that I've been looking at, in which they target the programs for foreigner physicians. And they tout them as really improving communication skills for physicians. And we can agree to that aspect, but I'm also interested in the kind of messaging, how those kinds of messages by the institution and the leadership are internalized, how you're just not deemed American enough, or very well-trained physicians because you have an accent. So there's so many aspects to assimilation, and it's not a word that I like to use. I'm only like repeating it because you brought up assimilation, and these are perfect examples where we feel that faculty have to assimilate to academic medicine, to whatever the traditional culture of academic medicine is. So those are a few examples.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about physician wellness and a component of physician wellness, which is burnout. So what have you seen in terms of the environment for faculty of color? How does that contribute to their wellness or detract from their wellness? As you said, there are assets that those doctors bring, and by being able to pursue projects that they love and that they're interested in, faculty of color are indeed, one might argue that they're contributing to their own wellness and their careers. There's the other piece of it too, where maybe the environment detracts. So maybe you could talk about maybe how the environment contributes first, and then how it might detract.
Yeah, perfect. So we know burnout. When you mix the reasons and the causes of burnout with already an experience that is often plagued with all these other issues, again, adding back to this isolation, discrimination, racism, a lot of other isms. And I have to also highlight that, again, my research was around Black and Latino faculty, but when we talk about faculty of color, that's more general. When you add this type of experience, how can burnout not be even more impactful to those groups, right? When you have patients, when we talk about, for example, reasons for burnout, the EMR system or patient flow or organization, systematic issues, all those things. But you add the patient that may see you come into the room and say, refuse to be treated by a Black physician, or I do not want to be seen by you. Depending on where you are, your resilience, for example, I mean, that has a major impact of, where you see yourself as a physician. Right. When you have those type of patient interactions, yesterday I was talking to one of our grand round speakers, and she was mentioning that this patient hung up on her 2 or 3 times, tried very hard not to think about the reason why this patient felt so freely to hang up on her, even though that she was trying to help out, that it didn't have something to do with her race and her gender, right? Because we can't forget about women of color and that intersectionality between race, ethnicity, and gender. So there are many things that may exacerbate, I guess, right, your risks to burnout. And I do believe that these experiences can have even a greater impact on the wellness of our physician faculty. I have started to take a look at this, but I don't have the numbers yet. For example, at Indiana University, we're adopting the Mayo, the Wellbeing Index, and I am collecting data, not just on gender, because that is something that is already tracked in the system, but also asking for that race and ethnicity connection. I don't have anything yet that I can report as statistically significant in terms of the number of, again, going back to the number of underrepresented faculty. It's not there to make it statistical significant, but I think I would like other individuals that maybe have greater numbers to take a look, or partner with other institutions to take a look really at the burnout rates in wellness of underrepresented physicians in their faculty.
Right. So given that we know that in general that burnout exists in about 50% of docs across the board, and Black and Latino docs are as susceptible, if not more, to burnout, what can academic medicine do to address burnout in for underrepresented faculty?
I've been thinking about this for a while, and it's hard to sometimes create change without data, right? Especially when you're talking to scientists, right? The data counts.
The data matters,
The data matters. I went from being an analytical chemist, of course, looking a lot into quantitative data, to now really enjoying qualitative research and narrative of faculty. So that's kind of a switch that I love. But without the data, it's very hard to make the case in this kind of setting. So I applaud all the institutions, all the academic medical centers that are looking at physician wellness and are addressing it, of course, especially at the organizational level. I applaud all the intentions of making your faculty more resilient, although sometimes I'm a little skeptical at those resiliency programs, because I think it often focuses on the physician, and if you don't focus on the organization, then you're putting, again, the burden on the population that needs it most, right? It's almost like, just leaving all diversity and inclusion work or cultural competency work to the underrepresented groups, right? That's not work to be pursued. But I think that there's a couple of things that I haven't seen yet. And one of them is the silence of the medical profession regarding the current environment, not just the academic environment, but the current environment. And I intend to, use your podcast as a political platform, but there's a reality, right? There's a reality of...
We're just talking truth here, Dr. Soto. It is what it is. It is what it is. So we talk about it.
Yes, there's a reality there, right, that underrepresented faculty are facing. They are not just coming to an environment and compartmentalize, what happened in the news or what happened to them on the way to work. So I do think that we have been complicit and silent about the current environment and the impact on underrepresented faculty and therefore under burnout. And if we're definitely truly interested in addressing physician burnout and wellness, that we can't ignore the sociopolitical context that our underrepresented faculty, physician, staff, you name it, are facing. So that is something I think that our leaders need to say something, right?
Yeah.
The other thing,
and they need to ask, there's maybe some of the, it's a challenge, right? Because if I'm the minority faculty and the the chair of my department comes to me and says, "Hey, I noticed you're a Black woman. What do you need? You probably need more than others."
You need a longer hug.
Going to say, "I'm good."
Yes.
So there has to be a way to access, like you said, through the data, but also access the needs of and provide support for these particular docs. And that is something that I'm particularly interested in from a, physician wellness perspective, is how best to offer and provide support. And at the very least, any docs that are listening to the podcast can certainly contact me.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I don't have many answers. I'm just, stating that there's a great responsibility that our executives, the C-suite, the leadership of institutions and academic medical centers have. I'm not saying that, you give an individual a hug. That is not the answer. But that in truly living the mission and the vision of academic medicine, of your institution, whatever that institution is, that in order to really live that, the values that you say in your website
right.
or whatever you have them posted, that you have to make leadership messages that really takes care of honest position and the honest reality that some members of your institution are facing.
Well said.
But no, the other aspects are related to the same things that I've been trying to practice, and I know that a lot of my colleagues have tried to practice self-care in trying to disconnect at times from, what is going on in the world. So each individual, I think, has to find their own self-care, what the self-care really mean to them, or how they want to practice this. So I think that there's a balance between self-care and activism. And that's, I would say, another way to address your own wellness. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself in ways that make sense to you, that recharge you, that re-energize you, that keep you passionate about the work that you're doing. And at the same time, if activism is, your cup of tea, and it can come in many forms, right? You can be as active as you want, but also those little acts of kindness and activism that may make truly a big difference at the end of the day.
Right. And I agree with you. Like, for example, we hadn't mentioned to this point, but Dr. Sotto and I have known each other for a long time, actually. And we were at University of, when my husband, Rob, went with the University of Colorado, we knew each other. So we've known each other for about 20 years.
His name is even mentioned in my dissertation. It's definitely a big impact in my own career and deciding which path to take.
Yeah. So we have a long history. What I was going to bring up is that back in the day, we used to have get-togethers, like speaking of activism. Part of it is doing, like you were saying, having the administration do for you. And then part of it's doing for yourself, maybe not only just for your individual self, but recognizing, identifying, and creating a community, supportive community. And that's what we did at Colorado, where we used to just bring the faculty and students and staff together, pick a faculty member's house, and we'd round robin having get-togethers at their houses. And at least for me, and I wasn't even on faculty there, I was in private practice, but to be able to meet other docs, researchers, med students, dentists, was a really fulfilling and enriching and supportive experience. Just looking forward to those quarterly dinners and just getting together.
So I have continued that tradition. Some people think that it's because I'm Puerto Rican that I like the parties, but they also fulfill other roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it doesn't have to, the gathering doesn't have to always be about a big celebration. I know that safe spaces, sometimes have been giving, bad undertone in recent years. But it is important to create those safe spaces for students, for trainees, for our faculty, where they can come together and process and reflect whatever it is. So that is one of my practices, right? Getting everybody together, feed them, dance, put some music. Also, obviously, is the goal of having an opportunity to reflect about, what just happened. We face many microaggressions throughout our time, and I know we haven't touched based on microaggressions, but those little instances, those little comments every day that may have a big impact on your experience. So all those moments need to be reflected upon, so you know how to manage them in the future, so you know how they make you feel, so you can develop allyships with other individuals, not just underrepresented, right?
Right.
We need allies of every shape, color.
Yes.
But we need those safe spaces to do that. And I consider that as one of my self-care activities, right? Getting people together and being able to enjoy the company and reflect about what happens.
What's going on every day. Any last thoughts? Any last things you want to share?
I want your take. What do you think in terms of wellness can faculty of color and other underrepresented groups can do?
I think that there's a general principles that you were talking about, and that, gosh, folks, that you've listened to the podcast that we follow. So caring for ourselves is paramount, and having support from the organization is really important as well. And actually, since burnout is a workplace phenomenon, some might argue that it's more important than the individual. I wouldn't say that necessarily, but they certainly have a effect on each other. I think at the root of burnout in general is that there tends to be a disconnect from ourselves, our authentic selves. So sometimes docs feel like they've lost their purpose, or they don't know who they are, or they feel like they're not, or they have to be someone else in order to do their jobs well. And I think getting back to that hated word, assimilation, I think that is part of the contributors, and this is just me, it's not research or anything, but just from my personal experience and talking to other docs, that when you have to put or feel as though, or even question whether or not you need to put part of yourself away to do your work, and that everybody runs into this to some degree. For example, you're a mom of 3 beautiful daughters. I'm a mom of 2 almost grown kids. So sometimes you feel like you have to put away like the part of you that's a mother, or personal things that it's kind of accepted. You can decide whether or not to put it away. But when you walk into the medical center or the hospital and you're a person of color, you can't put that. You cannot put that away. And so for that to be not accepted, starting with yourself and then the organization and the group that you're in, then I think that can cause a detriment. So my feeling is that the focus needs to be on, one, like you said, calling it like it is. That this is happening. Yeah. And then once you bring truth to it, then you can bring power and data and research dollars and stuff, Great. So thank you, everybody, for listening to a really interesting discussion on the experience of faculty of color, particularly Black and Latino faculty. It's been a great discussion, and look forward to you guys joining the Doctor's Life podcast the next time. Until then, hope everybody stays happy and healthy. Take care.
Thank you, Diane.
You've been listening to the Doctor's Life Podcast with Diane Ansari Wynn, MD. Go to www.dianeansari-win.com to read show notes, listen to past episodes, share your comments and show ideas, and pick up your free PDF and video of easy and proven strategies that will melt your daily stress away. That's www.dianeansari-winn.com.